Hi and welcome to the channel Newtown Naughty Boy once again for part 2 of the video relating to the Crosman Mk. In this video I will be putting back together the Crosman that we dismantled in part 1. So this shot shows my messy board with all of the bits on taped onto the numbers, so that I know the way in which we're going to put things back onto the gun. So let's start with putting the valve back into the gun. That was the last thing that we took out of the gun when we dismantled it. Here's our valve here, and the gun. I've cleaned this out and I've cleaned the valve up as well, so it's a matter of pushing the valve back into the frame of the gun, ensuring that of course the hole in the top of the valve here, you've got the two side screws here, for the holes for the screws, and a hole in the top here which needs to line up with the top so that the gas or the CO2 can actually enter into the barrel through the transfer port. So it's a matter of making sure that when you push the valve in, that it's lined up correctly. So I'm just going to use a tool, and I'm hoping that, unlike the situation where I took the valve out, I'm hoping this is all going to go back. I'm hoping that this is all going to go back smoothly. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back to show you the next stage. So I had to actually tap the valve in a little bit with the hammer and screwdriver to line up the brass threaded holes here recessed. So it's a matter of just taking our two screws here and inserting these in and doing them up. Hopefully those will screw in quite nicely for us. Okay, let's try the other side first. Yep, that one's going in quite nicely. Let's use a bigger screwdriver on that. I suspect as I screw this in, it will locate the valve to the position in there that it needs to be. So that's good, that's in there nice and tight. Flip it over to the other side and put the other one in. Yeah, so that one's going in a lot easier now. Okay, so that's the valve in. That was much easier than when I had to take it out. The next stage is to put the trigger back in. So we have our pin here that holds the trigger and the sear together through the body, and our little trigger spring there. So the first thing to do is to attempt to line up the trigger with the sear through the hole in the frame. Now this is going to be a little bit fiddly, so I'm going to just put this into position and then show you. So I'm hoping you can see that I've not hammered this pin in yet, but the trigger and the sear are sitting on that spindle. The trigger goes through the sear, and the pin holds those two parts in place, ensuring that the sear has its adjustment grub screw on the outside here towards where the blade is on the outside of the gun. Don't get it round the other way, otherwise you'll be dismantling the gun again. So it's just a matter of tapping this cotter pin through and making it stable in there. Okay, so what I've done next is I've actually taken the trigger guard, and I've screwed the screw in at the front of the trigger guard so that the trigger guard can actually hinge here still, because I still need to get the spring behind the trigger here and close all this up then, and close then the trigger guard. And by doing that, then the trigger will be trapped in there and sprung. So I hope you can see that now. I've actually banged through with the hammer lightly the pin that holds the back of the trigger guard in after inserting the spring behind the trigger. I used a little bit of grease to hold the spring in place whilst I closed everything up, and then put the pin through and hammered that home very lightly. So now the trigger's working okay, and I can see through through the gun there. I can see the actual sear moving up and down, so I know that action is okay in there, and we can proceed with the next part. Part to go in is the hammer and the hammer sleeve, making sure that we've got this in the right orientation. So the hammer, obviously the part that's solid is facing into the valve, and it's going to slide with that hole there. The hole through the hammer there is going to obviously be pulled back or pulled forward more like by the cocking threaded spindle that we're going to insert in a minute. So that goes in like that. So make sure that goes in, and make sure that you've lubricated that up as well. So the next part is the threaded cocking lever, if you like, that has to go through from one side to another. And I remember from last time that I had to pull the trigger to enable the hammer inside to actually slip back slightly. So that's what's happened there. That's gone through now, and now I just need to just give it a little bit more persuasion to go through there, so that I can actually screw the other nut on the other side. So that's in there now, okay, and can move backwards and forwards. That's fine. The next part to go in is this spring with the pin at the back of it. If you remember, that also goes down. I just put a little bit of grease on that on the spring before I insert it. But this also needs to align itself with the hole, so you need to turn the cocking bolt around slightly to ensure that the hole matches up for this little spring to pop into. So it's a little bit fiddly, but it will there. I felt it go in, so that just needs lining up, and that will go in perfectly. I'll try and get it so that you can see it sitting in there now. Yeah, you can see that now sitting in there, the spring. Okay, so the next part is to put the barrel back in, and the its locking nailed nut at the breech end. You remember I said to you when we took it out that there's a little detent in the barrel at this end that needs to be facing upwards to match with this screw hole here. So just be mindful of that as you locate it in, and you can just move it around until you can see it lining up in there. Then it's a matter of putting the nailed nut in place and screwing it in. Actually, I've got that nailed nut, I think, round the wrong way. Let's have a look. There seems to be, it could go in either way, I think, but let's have another go. Okay, so I think the way to do this is to get it in there as tight as possible. Right, get it in there as tight as possible, and then align. You can see through this hole here where that screw needs to go in. So I'm going to screw in now this grub screw into the top. Nice. Lining it up carefully first of all. I think I'll take it off the wrench first. Makes it a little bit easier to locate there and screw it, and then tighten it up with the Allen key or wrench. So now the barrel's tight and is constricted by that screw there, and if we need to, you can use a pair of pliers with the masking tape on again to actually just give that nailed nut a little bit of a tighter pinch, just to make sure that's you don't have to over tighten it, but just to pinch it up slightly. So the next step is to insert the barrel shroud assembly. You remember there was quite some complicated little bits on here that may need to line up if you've got this adjustment business going on here. If you haven't, you'll probably just have the flat end here and the probe to slide in, so that should go in quite easily now and line up, and it does. So now I've got that barrel shroud actually pushed in there. I'm actually keeping some pressure on that because it actually, now it's under some tension here and it wants to spring out. So it was a little bit fiddly to actually align everything up in here to make sure that it all fitted together, and I'm keeping some pressure on there to ensure that it doesn't all fly apart again. So with that done like that, I'm going to then obviously screw this in as quickly as possible. The nut that goes in onto the end of the barrel there and ensures that the whole of this assembly is actually kept together. So if I quickly wind that around, alright, so that's keeping it in there tight now, and I'm just going to tighten this nut up in here with some long nose pliers just to make sure that it's tight. Beginning to look more like a Crosman Mk now, and at this point just to test out that the trigger and everything is working, you can push that cocking lever forward and press the trigger. Make sure if you've got the two-stage there that works as well. If it's not working, then you're going to have to take it apart and understand why that might be, but assuming that you've got that far and it's all working, then we can proceed with the next parts. Part is to place the probe back in through the back of the gun, and if you remember, on this collar here that's going to hold everything in place, there's a hole, an extra hole that needs to be facing upwards. So that's your marker. So thread the probe through, and then you're going to push this collar through and line it up. If I use a pick at the top of the gun here, I can kind of locate that hole better there. So I just need a smaller screwdriver just to locate those threaded parts in there. Let's give it another tap there, I think. That's it. I think that's in now. Yes, that's dead on. So now I need to just put the screws back in, make sure that the bolt is working there. Remember when we dismantled the gun, where the back sight is, that there's a third hole in the middle here, and in there goes first of all a ball bearing, so we drop that in, then a little spring, and then on top of all of that we have the grub screw. So I'm just going to do that up now. This may need a slightly different smaller there we go. So that goes in, and what that does is, actually that's too tight now, and slacken it off slightly. Now it enables me to draw the cocking arm backwards and forwards. So you need to find the best position there to load that so that it actually turns okay and locks as well. The sight back on. The first bit to go in is this elevation adjustment screw at the back. It's kind of a screw, but it also has, when you wind that back in, you have to then put a washer on top of that, and it's just a floating washer. It's not held in until you actually put the leaf spring on top of it. So you insert your leaf spring, and then the last screw for the sight at the front here goes in to hold the whole assembly together. So a little bit fiddly, and of course once I've done this, I may have to obviously adjust the sights on this, because I suspect they'll be out with all this messing about. But that's in there tight, so I may need to adjust the elevation at the back of that now. But that's all together now, so that's all the major parts done, and it's just a matter now of putting the grips back on. So these are the last parts on my board, and if you're doing the same, these should be the last ones for you as well. If you've got anything else left on your board, then unfortunately you've missed something out somewhere. So with all the messing about that we've done, taking it apart, it was a good job that I did take these plastic grips off, because one or two times I had to actually have the gun in a vise, so that wouldn't have been good. So don't over tighten these screws, otherwise you'll crack the plastic, and you don't want to do that. There's two lengths of screws here, I think. Oh no, these ones are more or less the same. I'm not sure why I've got some odd screws here. But on the other side, one screw was certainly longer than the other. Not sure why that was. Okay. So that's all done now. So it's just now a matter of putting some gas in the gun and actually just testing it to make sure that it fires and it doesn't leak. So I'm going to put some gas in front of you whilst we're videoing, just so you can see if this has worked or not. I'm going to spray a little bit of silicone around this seal that goes on the plug, and screw this now. I think I explained to you on the last video when we reviewed these guns that on this particular variant there's a little tab over that will puncture the gas, and you push it over from one side to the other, and that will puncture the CO2 capsule inside, but then you must push the lever back afterwards. So let's do that. So because if you don't, then you'll let out all of the gas. So that's punctured inside there. I can't hear any gas escaping, so I'm going to dry fire it now just to see or make sure that it's okay. I know that there's no ammunition or pellets in the gun itself, so let's just dry fire this now just to see if it fires. Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. No leaks at all, and I'm sure that that's going to be as accurate as it was before we took it apart, and perhaps a little bit more powerful. Perhaps it's gained a little bit, but it wasn't I don't think it was below par anyway. But that's great. I hope you've enjoyed this video of taking this Crosman Mk II apart. It's been a joy to do. A bit hairy now and again on some of the bits to get apart, but please, if you've got any comments, please add these to the video in the comments part, because these videos are about helping other people maintain their guns and taking them apart in the right way. So if you've got anything to add on this, please put some comments on there and some suggestions, and that would be great. So that's it from me on this part 2. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll speak to you soon. Well, if you've ever wondered where the name Newtown Naughty Boy comes from, well, you can learn a little bit more about that. I did write a book last year, and quite recently I've had the book republished. It's got a nice new cover on it. It details my story really, growing up in the UK in a small town, and all the things that I got up to during the 50s, 60s and 70s. There's quite a bit in there. There's some pictures, there's illustrations, there's a little bit of naughtiness, there's quite a bit of airgun shooting and shenanigans. There's stuff that will make you laugh in this book. It's a book you can order from Amazon, but also it's available on Kindle quite cheaply, so why not give it a go? It's a really good read, and then you can give me some feedback on it. Hope you enjoy. Give it a try.